So we're almost there. We are on the eve of Inauguration Day. As we record this, perhaps it will be Inauguration Day by the time you're listening or watching. Trump 2, what will it mean for America and the world? Welcome to Talking Politics USA. Well, as you can see, it's a very rainy, to say the least, Washington as we record this. It is going to be a very cold Washington, we're told, tomorrow, -12, and therefore in the middle of the day, and therefore the ceremony has moved inside the Capitol building. You can see behind me in the rotunda. With me to work out what it's all going to mean, I have, of course, Heather Nauert, who used to work in the first Trump administration, and Robert Moore, who is sitting through his 5th US inauguration. What do we both expect from tomorrow? Heather, you first.
Well, I think, unfortunately, they've had to move it inside. And so that has to be very frustrating to the president-elect, who loves pageantry, of course. And so not having the imagery of him on the west side of the Capitol, looking out over to the Washington Monument, to the hundreds of thousands of people, perhaps even more, will be a real disappointment. We will still, of course, see inside the Capitol, and I think people will be looking forward to that. But then also, the parade has been canceled, or at least moved inside the Capital One Arena, which is about 10 minutes away from the U.S. Capitol. But it's impossible to replicate a parade inside an arena. So I think that will be unfortunate, but you still have a lot of enthusiasm among many Americans who've traveled here to witness this event.
They certainly have. You bump into them absolutely everywhere. Robert, last time Trump was inaugurated into the presidency, we spent a lot of time debating what kind of tone he was going to strike in the speech. And then afterwards we were a bit like, well, wow, that was not what we expected. You know, I don't know why we thought any differently. He said exactly what he'd said on the campaign trail. I think we thought he might strike a different tone. What do you expect this time, or is expectation pointless?
Well, I think we're expecting a longer speech than last time. In 2017, it was 17 minutes, I believe. Now we're being given guidance. We'll see if it's true that it may be as long as 40 minutes. Last time we had that phrase that resonated so strikingly when he talked about American carnage and pitched an extraordinarily dark vision of America. This time we're told he will try and have a slightly more positive tone. But look, this is Trump unleashed. He doesn't have to stand for office again. So no doubt it will have an element that is that draws on the traction he gets from the campaign rallies. So I'm expecting some of that language as well. And we will see. But I do think it's going to be the start of another kind of extraordinarily tumultuous presidency. You know, this time it's different and the vibe is different, as we often say, because he won the popular vote. And there's really not going to be this kind of popular resistance that we saw in the early days of the first Trump term. But we expect some degree of turmoil and tumult, because that goes with the territory of Donald Trump's politics.
Well, what you say is turmoil, I think, will be a lot of action. He plans to introduce 100 executive orders on day one.
I've heard it said he's going to start signing them in the presidential limo on the way back to the White House.
I'm sure he will. He is very eager to get started. And we have a lot of work we have to do in terms of the economy, fixing the border situation, so many issues that he wants to address. All the foreign affairs matters. So we're going to really see full throttle day one. In fact, they've already been doing this ahead of the inauguration, and that is, we've seen Trump's Middle East envoy negotiating on the Gaza ceasefire. So they've been very active on other issues as well. So they're going to be raring to go.
But I mean, just to point out, turmoil and tumult, is consistent with kind of dynamism, right? I mean, whether it's a positive or a negative depends on how you view the second Trump term. But the sort of thing I'm alluding to is that many of those executive orders are likely to be challenged in the court.
Some will.
Some will be. So we're going to get straight away into the sort of into the world of sort of legal challenges and liberal America being outraged. And so that's what I mean by tumult. It's not meant to be a negative necessarily. It's just a comment that we're going to get quickly into liberal Americans and pro-Trump loyalists, politically at odds.
I suppose I only come in and out of here, and so I feel like I maybe notice the differences more than perhaps if I lived here all the time. And I know we've talked about it, but I'm so struck by how different it feels this time from his first presidency. Last time, there was just this overwhelming sense amongst a lot of people in the media here, on Capitol Hill, in the international media, amongst international politicians, pretty much everywhere, that America had done this crazy thing. It was a terrible mistake. They'd wake up in 5 minutes and realize it was a terrible mistake, and then they'd do something more sensible next time, and life would get back to normal. And obviously, he did only survive one term. But the fact that he's back again, I just feel like the way everyone, even people who don't like him, are approaching this is completely different. Like a recognition that he's all powerful, a recognition that, yeah, this was not a mistake, this is absolutely what America intended, and everything else that goes with it. But also this sense, which maybe I'm exaggerating, that he's probably only got 2 years. Maybe not. Maybe he'll, defy the odds on the midterms. But if he does lose the House, certainly in the midterms, as presidents very often do, then his room for manoeuvre maybe gets a bit more limited. So he's got this amazing mandate and maybe only 2 years to make stuff happen. Fair or not fair?
I think you're right. He has 2 years to make it happen, because that's when people start. You obviously have the midterm elections. The incumbent party tends to not do as well, although Joe Biden in the 2022 midterm elections picked up some seats, although it was anticipated that there would be a big Republican red wave that just frankly did not materialize. But really, it's about a year and a half, 2 years, where you can get a lot done before the midterm elections and before people start thinking about the next presidential election. And then, of course, we have J.D. Vance, who is going to take on a more prominent role as the administration wanes on. But that in and of itself will be a bit of a challenge between the sitting president and his vice president. So that'll be one that you want to watch, how that relationship unfolds in the coming years.
I think you're just talking about your sense of how different it is from 8 years ago. I think, even for those of us who kind of watch American politics for a living and follow it all day by day, I'm struck by how much difference winning the popular vote has made to the psychology of the country. It's done on an electoral college system. So, his victory in 2016 was as significant as his victory in 2024. But this time, because he won the popular vote, I think it's sort of demoralized the Democrats. They haven't really got an argument against the sort of power of the Trump second term. And it's just striking to me that it's not just a sort of a fact of life that he won the popular vote. It's changed the whole sort of culture and the conversation about the power and the legitimacy of the Trump second term. I'm very struck by how that has demoralized Democrats and left them wondering how they lost so decisively.
And as I speak with Democrats, they're struggling to find a message, and they're struggling to find a messenger as well. And one of the
seem
big
completely silent to me. I mean, even when I'm sitting here watching, on American television, where are you all?
and they're trying to determine themselves whether they're going to take that turn to the left, as we saw during this campaign. AOC, the member of Congress, has gotten so much attention. A lot of Democrats think that that is the future of their party, going more to the left. But of course, can you win the national vote? Can you win over moderates and even Republicans that they would need to win as well going into the next election?
I tell you one thing I find confusing is you mentioned the 2022 midterms when everyone expected Joe Biden to do badly. They expected the Republicans to have a bit of a wave. It didn't happen. And it seemed, unless I misinterpreted it, it seemed to me that Trump candidates did particularly badly. And so there was a sort of feeling, well, that's the end of Trump. Of course, it turned out not to be true. Amazing comeback. And here he is, all powerful. Where do we think that leaves kind of America and MAGA and where it stands politically? We keep talking, we do a UK politics equivalent of this, and we talk practically every week about the volatility of politics, and Keir Starmer might have this massive majority, but he could lose it all next time. Are we going to see Prime Minister Nigel Farage? The idea of a third party leader coming in and potentially being talked about Prime Minister, even only 10 years, we'd have just considered absolutely ludicrous in British politics. But that is the volatility. So do we think something really has changed in America and that's a result of it? Or is this just a natural swing from what do you think is going on?
I do think this is here to stay, at least for now. And by that, I mean at least for the next one, possibly two presidential elections. You have seen Donald Trump really remake the Republican Party. and I'm a Republican, but when I was growing up, Republicans were more what we would call country club Republicans.
George W. Bush, right?
Yes, business, white-collar Republicans. And now Trump has single-handedly changed the makeup of the Republican Party, where you have African Americans, you have Latinos who are enthusiastic about this president, and they're the ones who turned out to vote for him in droves. So really speaking to the working man and woman, and that resonates with them. And that's a population that has felt ignored for so many years, especially by elites. And that's exactly why we saw President Trump win in the 2016 election, because they showed up to vote for him and really liked his sense of populism and vision for the country. And now, of course, with this past election, he just built upon that base.
And you're talking about your UK political podcast as well, Tom, and there is a sort of synergy here, because what some of Trump's advisors are saying to Nigel Farage and the Reform Party is, look, focus on the forgotten man and woman. That is a message that won here, and it's a message that can win in British politics too. And that is, that's coming straight out of Mar-a-Lago and to the sort of Reform Party leadership. So there is a sense here, I think, that the Republican Party is now a kind of a working class party. It's kind of inverted everything. And that Donald Trump is the kind of leader of that party is, of course, astonishing, but it's part of his resurrection and his extraordinary personality, that he, as a sort of real estate billionaire out of New York, is able to reach the parts of America that feel neglected and forgotten.
This is a bit of a sub-point, Heather, but I wanted to ask you, there's speculation over the last few days that the Trump administration might decide not to accept Peter Mandelson as the UK ambassador to Washington, which, if true, would certainly put the cat amongst the pigeons. But is that credible or not credible in your view?
I think it could happen. I mean, the United States government needs to provide agreement, which is basically agreement that he could serve as the ambassador to the United States. You always want an incoming ambassador to any country to have a great relationship with the incoming administration. We'll see how Mandelson does. I recall him having said some very colorful things about the president previously. The United States
would be a big step with your closest ally, wouldn't it?
Well,
to sort of turn
Republicans would argue it's a big step to put in an ambassador that right out of the gate we don't like. That the Trump administration, or the incoming Trump administration, has great concern and skepticism
about. But isn't the argument, when we've discussed it before, or when I've discussed it with the Republicans before, about some of these controversial appointments, Jared Kushner's dad being made an ambassador, the argument is always said, well, he may be the ambassador to Paris primarily because of his relationship with the Trump family, but that's what you want. You want somebody who's got access to the president, who can pick up the phone to the president, who can influence the president. That's what the French would want. Well, Peter Mandelson is very close to the Labour leadership. He's an operator. So isn't the logic, well, you'd want someone here who's very close to Keir Starmer so you can build the best possible relationship?
Yes, but we also want somebody that we can pick up the phone and call and have a good relationship with that ambassador. So I would not be surprised if the Trump administration were to maybe delay things a little bit. That's one I'm going to be watching carefully.
And on that, I mean, they might also delay the arrival of Keir Starmer into town, right? I mean, do you remember how Theresa May was determined, I mean, almost kind of bizarrely and slightly in a slightly unseemly way, to be the first foreign leader into the first Trump White House? Well, I mean, I don't think that Keir Starmer is necessarily going to be the first leader into the second Trump.
Isn't it really weird?
I don't think he will be.
Yeah. Right, agreed.
So, I have no information to say that, but just that is my political sense.
But that's the talk. Yes. So, I mean, do not expect this second Trump White House to be kind of deferential to previous protocols and relationships. They're here to fight for America first, and if they think their supporters are skeptical of Peter Mandelson and perhaps his business relationships with China, and they want to slight Keir Starmer, they won't hesitate to do so.
We've spent a lot of time on the UK version of this podcast with Robert and Anushka talking about how Labour handles this, because I think it's really problematic for Keir Starmer. Like on the one hand, I don't think Trump definitely has his supporters back in the UK. There's obviously crossover with Reform and Farage, but there's also got a lot of people who are pretty sceptical about Donald Trump in the UK. So, I think a lot of people in the middle of the UK kind of want us to have a decent relationship with America, but maybe there's a reason why that scene in Love Actually was so popular. We don't like kowtowing to the Americans very much. So I think I don't know. I think it's tricky and intriguing and interesting. But one thing I did want to ask you was, you've been down at Mar-a-Lago. It feels like this sort of extraordinary, like imperial court where you turn up and there's a sort of outer ring. Paint us a Mar-a-Lago scene.
It is truly fascinating. First of all, security is tight, as you can imagine, after having survived 2 assassination attempts, and it's a harder place to secure as well because it's sort of right out on the water, though, as you can see. So people come in, in buses and cars and have to go through all of that security. But also people are lining up outside hoping to be invited in. So if you can imagine that visual of some very prominent Americans, well off, wealthy, kind of standing around on the sidewalk hoping that someone will grant them access. Now then, of course, there are people who have been invited, where the president-elect wants to meet with them and says, hey, come on down tomorrow, I want to meet on a certain topic. And so people are sort of milling about inside Mar-a-Lago, very lavish, beautiful, exquisite. I thought it might be a little tacky, a little gauche, and it's not. It's actually lovely. The service is excellent. And then you see, people trying to meet with the president-elect. He has a balcony upstairs where late into the evening, he will spend time with his, most selective guests. And they blare music, Phantom of the Opera and other songs you can hear throughout the entire property. I've never seen or heard anything like that. It is really, really fascinating.
Not the way you remember, but from our history books, did it remind you of like a medieval royal court with everybody trying to kiss the ring and get in with the king?
No, actually not. I mean, people are eager, but you would find that with any president, that people are eager to press the flesh and get a moment with him. And he loves it. He feeds off of the energy of people coming to visit him. So you'll see a lot of newsmakers and friends and business people, and that is a key thing that is very different from the his first term in office.
All these billionaires kissing the ring and wanting to be seen to kiss the ring as well.
Well, you have Mark Zuckerberg and all of the others who are heading to Mar-a-Lago to meet with them, and then of course coming here this week for the inauguration.
I mean, I think that's a fundamentally important point, is we're not just looking at a kind of a political or economic change. There's a kind of a cultural moment in America, this inauguration, and partly it's because corporate America is deferring to him and coming around to him. Social media, is changing. It's dynamic with, already he's talking about bringing TikTok back online. So, I mean, it feels like this is a cultural moment in a realignment sense, just as much as a political and economic one.
I tell you what really strikes me is that I mentioned already that we keep talking about how volatile politics is, and you kind of think, if you were to take a step back and sort of analyze it on the normal rules of politics, he's got 2 years till his power really starts to fade, and it'll probably start fading a bit after 1 year. But it doesn't feel like that when you're standing witnessing all this, talking about, I mean, is it conceivable that he might really, partly because the party's so much his, and whoever gets the crown may well, if things go reasonably well the next 4 years, get the crown all the way into the White House? Is it conceivable that he maintains more power than we normally expect from a president in the last year or two of his final term, or do you think that's just inevitable fact of life for American
I frankly think we're seeing it already. We see members of Congress working so closely with the president and very eager to hear everything he has to say. Many elected officials see the president as really having been the kingmaker. When he comes in and endorses someone, that can lead someone to victory. And so there's a strong recognition of that, and we'll continue to see, I think, the president playing an even stronger role with members of Congress and also the governors as well than you typically see in many presidencies.
I think Heather makes an excellent point, because it's not just the power doesn't diminish after 2 years this time, because it's the power of the endorsement, and that lasts, throughout the Trump term.
And think about the people he's also surrounded himself with. Some of the cabinet nominees that he has selected have massive social media followings and have profiles where they've either worked in television or are well-known personalities. And so that helps to amplify his message as well. Not that a president needs any larger of a megaphone than he already has, but those influencers who will be in his cabinet have the ability to reach their own audiences and continue to message on his behalf. And for that reason too, I think he'll be particularly strong after 2 years.
Final question to you both. If you were advising the Democratic hopefuls for the next time, what would you be both saying to them tonight? What do they do? How do they pitch themselves? Where do they go?
I'll tell you exactly what I said to some Democrats at dinner, and just 2 nights ago, and they still haven't quite accepted this. This leftward move has got them where they are right now. They lost as a result of this strong turn to the left. They have to moderate themselves. They need to find more moderate voices, not be afraid of the criticism that they receive, for example, in support of Israel. Republicans are far more comfortable with having been criticized for many, many years and called all sorts of names and disparaged. Democrats have to get comfortable with being disparaged, whether it's people who are more supportive of the Palestinians or others. They need to moderate themselves and not listen to those voices because they are a distraction, and those voices, in fact, cause them to lose.
Yeah, I think it's sort of burying the sort of Trump derangement syndrome and burying it, for good, because that sort of that negativity has, I think, damaged them politically, and I think they need to work out why the heartland of America turned against them, why Hispanics are skeptical of their message, why African American men are skeptical of their message. They kind of not just need to rebrand themselves, they need to reinvent themselves and understand that what they said before is not working. The messengers didn't bring their message into heartland America, and just understand what the average American family is thinking and why they're so skeptical of the sort of woke America that the liberals tried to push on a country that just wasn't prepared to accept it.
Whatever the next 4 years will be, it'll certainly be fascinating. Much more over the course of this week from us, but for now, from Washington, no longer raining but still quite chilly due to snow very soon. Thank you very much for spending time with us. Goodbye.